We're about 4 weeks out from the Northwest Flower and Garden Show. Long before I was a designer at the show, I started as an attendee, marking up my catalog and planning my day around seminars and show gardens. I then became a volunteer, shadowing Lloyd and helping out wherever was needed. Eventually, I stepped into designing show gardens, and this year I'm doing something new again. I'm speaking at the event for the first time and competing in Container Wars. Today, I want to talk about my journey through the show and the important role it's played in my life since moving to Washington. This episode kicks off a series we're doing as we count down to the show. We're about 4 weeks out, and over the next month, we'll be sharing conversations with other designers, people working behind the scenes, and the reflections from our team as we prepare our next garden. We're already pivoting a little bit because things are blooming that shouldn't be blooming till next month. You spend a lot of time planning for these shows and thinking about these shows and building and acquiring and all of this kind of stuff. It's really ramping up the level of work required to get it done so that everything can like, kind of go in seamlessly on the day of. If you've ever been curious about what the Northwest Flower and Garden Show is all about or what it takes to create one of these gardens, this series is for you. Welcome to the Relish Gardens podcast, where we have conversations about the intersection between the garden and your life and how all of those things are intertwined. How to care for your space, how to prune, basically everything that's related to the design, development, and keeping of a garden. I'm Claire Liddell Hanna, the founder and lead designer at Relish Gardens, where we build, design, and maintain beautiful gardens. Let's dig in. Before I was building gardens, I loved going to the Flower and Garden Show. I would buy my tickets. I would get the little brochure. I would go through and research all of the talks, and then I would highlight them all, and I would schedule my days around it. I would book the whole show. It didn't start out that way, but that's definitely where it ended up. It was something that I looked forward to. And if I had a friend that wanted to go with me, then I was like, great. And if they didn't, I was like, great, because then I could just kind of go to whatever talks I wanted to go to. I just went and I took notes and I learned and I studied. The garden show was a break from my everyday life. It was my little me vacation, complete with wine slushies on the end caps and pickles. The pickles are really good. I don't know what the pickle guy's name is, but every year now at the show, we eat the pickles from the pickle guy. There's one time I flew home from China and I went straight to the garden show. I just walked around until it was a decent hour for me to go to bed. It's been kind of this integral touch point for me throughout the years, something that I've looked forward to every year. I really just wanted to be in my garden, but it was February. February, there's not a lot happening in the garden. And so it was that precursor to garden season. And it helped bridge the gap between the cold months and full garden season. It just got me thinking gardens, and it's exciting because the Pacific Northwest can be really challenging. It can be really gray and it's kind of dark and you can kind of get stuck in it a little bit. And so for me, it was a way to pull out of that. It was the way I dealt with the doldrums of this time of year when it's gray and kind of yucky out. It was the last big thing I did. I remember like hearing about COVID and being at the garden show going, this is probably a bad idea. And then being like, well, it'll be fine. What could go wrong? Yeah. And then they didn't have it the next year. I had been toying with the idea of going into some sort of garden-centric type work during that whole COVID era. I had an opportunity to kind of like think about what I wanted to do, not just what like I needed to do at that point. I was working on a project to pitch different types of television shows that were in the home and garden market. And I was looking at the Flower and Garden Show. I was looking at who were the people that I was noticing there, what were the stories that we could kind of tell. I remember finding Lloyd on LinkedIn and I was like, he's producing the garden show. Okay, I understand that dynamic from kind of more of a media perspective. Lloyd, for those that you don't know, produces the show gardens portion of the garden show. And it's a huge undertaking. The whole garden show is a huge undertaking. But Lloyd specifically is the guy who produces those beautiful gardens that you walk in and see as soon as you come in. We actually just got done recording an episode with Lloyd, and that'll be later in this series that we're doing on the garden show, going in depth behind the scenes into what it takes to kind of develop and run the show from his perspective. The Flower and Garden Show and Lake Washington Tech have had a long-standing partnership over the years, and every year they bring students in. The students get to work with designers and the builds to understand kind of what goes into building a garden. It gives them an opportunity to meet everybody in the industry in one place, and it's great for that. But then also it's great for the people building the gardens because often you just need a few extra hands. And for us specifically, as we've built these gardens, the students have been they've just been invaluable. They just kind of get in there, get it done. So all of the designers that want to work with students come in, they pitch their garden, they give the students an idea of what kind of garden they're working with, what kind of perspective they bring. They kind of tell them what it is that they'd be doing if they decided to work on their garden. And so you get to kind of choose. You can either choose to be with one garden the whole time, or you can pick several different gardens, or you can kind of break it up however you want. It's almost like a really quick internship. And then this guy, Lloyd, that I had seen through my other work, pops up again. And he's one of the people that you could volunteer under. I picked a couple gardens and I picked Lloyd. And it was great. Had a lot of fun. I volunteered for him because I was really interested in what does it look like to produce a show of this size in real time, which is fascinating to me. I did the art direction for a few commercials. There is a strong connection between building a show garden and building a set. You're quickly building something that is going to be torn down in a few days. It has to do with telling a story, developing lighting, developing a perspective. Lloyd would tell us to do something, and I swear I'd come back, and I think he was annoyed because I'd be like, I'm done. And he's like, now I have to give her something else to do. I planted up pots, like moving plants around, ordering mulch, all of the things that you do to build a garden. It was just being on the floor and participating in the crazy that is building a show for the Flower and Garden Show. While I was in school during that summer, I saw Lloyd at another industry event, and I said, it's a bucket list of mine to do a show garden. He was so kind because he just was like, yeah, let's talk about it. Do you have ideas? And I was like, whoa, not tomorrow. I don't know. I hadn't gotten that far. I had definitely a perspective that I was coming from at that point. And he's like, yeah, so let's keep talking. And so the next year we connected because I had asked him if I could work on somebody else's garden. So he connected me with Mark from Little Prince. And Mark had a rough idea of what was going to happen with the show. But he said, you can come in and work as a designer and design on the fly and pull this garden together. There's like the basic building blocks, but it needs a designer's touch. It was so much fun. I mean, I love every year, but I think that year was just such a blast because, Mark has like every plant you could ever think of. And if he doesn't have it, he knows somebody who does. I just appreciated how he just kind of let me kind of run with my ideas. And I would pitch something and be like, yeah, let's do it. We're designing it on the fly. And it was a very small garden, like a vignette. And so it wasn't like high stakes, but it turned out beautifully. It felt like a garden. It was gorgeous. It was fun to work with Mark. It was fun to work with the volunteers to pull that all together. I definitely went to bed at night dreaming about burgundy hellebores and how that would all translate, and the river of hellebores that I was trying to portray would it come through in these drifts. And I really loved that garden. It was really fun. So by that point, I caught the bug. Lloyd's like, are you ready to do it next year? And I was like, yep, let me at it, coach. I understood how much work went into the building of the show garden. So at the end of the year, Mark and we start talking, and we're going to design this whole garden around this giant gunnera. Mark is going to grow throughout the year, and a stumpery. A stumpery is a pile of roots. Like the way that they were developed in England is because they were taking down a lot of trees and they piled all the roots and then they planted in them. I love the idea of the reuse of this essentially trash material and then using it as a way to highlight your most precious plants. And it was something that they did in Victorian England. Highgrove in England, they have a giant stumpery. And then there's a few in the States. There's a stumpery in Federal Way that is beautiful, that's local. And I had been to the one that they had put in over at Heronswood as well. And so I was really kind of entrenched in this idea of the stumpery and ferns. And I love ferns and beautiful shade gardens. So we're like drawing it out on the show garden floor. I still have those somewhere in one of my notebooks, the original show garden design, and it actually didn't skew that far away. But the whole idea was to kind of bridge that gap between the inside and the outside. Little Prince, they have amazing plants for indoors and outdoors. We had launched Relish, I think it was the December right before we had our first show garden, and that was Emerald Revelry. It was really stressful. I came in and all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, no, this is my garden. And if it looks bad, it's like fully on me because my name is going to be on here now. It's going to be under Relish. And, we drive in with all of our materials and, we were building a stumpery. So part of our materials was just this pile of stumps or just essentially just trash is what one of the neighbors said. We started unloading it and he goes, that's the stuff that you're supposed to get rid of after you've put your garden together. That's not the stuff you bring in to build your garden. And as a new designer and somebody who was like just kind of like getting my sea legs, it was just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Um, my neighbor is bringing in a pre-built shed on a truck, and I'm bringing in a pile of trash stumps. And it was, gosh, the audacity. Stevie and Jeff and everybody that was on our crew were so encouraging just to like pursue the vision that I had for that garden. Steve was just like, stay in your lane, Claire. Just do your thing. Great advice. Once I could get past, oh my gosh, what have I done? I've just brought in a bunch of trash to build a garden out of in front of all of these people and my peers as a first-time gardener in this space. But it was beautiful. It turned out beautiful. Mark had brought a ton of plants from Little Prince and all of the ferns that we had been talking about. He had been able to force the 2 Gunnera, and they were beautiful and huge. And I mean, it just went off and it was beautiful. The folks over at Skagit Gourmet Mushrooms, they had brought us mushrooms and we could like switch out the mushrooms every day. We wanted it to feel really like a foraging space. And by the end of it, we had mushrooms that were popping out of the logs that we had brought in on their own and little bugs like making their homes in this stumpery that was in the middle of concrete. But the bugs had no idea. And I think it turned out really beautifully. We won several awards and Lloyd comes up and he's like, are you going to come back? I was like, okay, we've delivered. He said, but you can't do the same thing. It has to look completely different. And so I was like, okay, I gotcha. And so, of course, my mind automatically starts going different, opposite. I had recently just taken a trip to Arizona, and Arizona is a much drier climate than what I grew up in. But there was definitely a lot of plants that were reminiscent to me, to the gardens and the spaces that I had grown up in. And so automatically I just went right back to Northern California, dry, hot spaces. So that was last year's theme. We went from Gunnera and shade plants and ferns to agaves and succulents. It was like polar opposite. Getting to show a different perspective. That for me was what was interesting about the garden show. Not every homeowner is asking me to put a stumpery in their backyard, but getting to educate all these gardeners about a stumpery and to like show them, look, stumperies are so cool, and getting the opportunity to show a different gardening perspective. Whenever I came to the garden show, I was always looking for takeaways and things that I could implement into my own garden and something that was a new perspective. And so every year that we come, I'm always trying to think about what am I really interested in this year? What are the takeaways for people to take into their own gardens? Don't get me wrong, winning an award is like lovely. If I thought about the awards, I wouldn't win any awards. I'd make myself crazy. The first year that I did the show garden with Mark, we won People's Choice for Little Prince. And then these last 2 years, we've also won the People's Choice. And throughout that, we've won different awards. This coming year, we're doing a really small garden because we want to show how you can accomplish big things in small spaces. And then also this year, I'm going to be doing a talk for the first time, as well as competing in container wars, which we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to it. I think I've only seen it on YouTube, so it'll be interesting. I'm actually competing against Kate from Hello Garden, and she is like a pro. She's been doing this for a couple years now, and I'm afraid she's gonna kick my butt. We're gonna have her on the show. We're actually talking to her tomorrow. I'm looking forward to hearing what she's doing. I feel like our gardens have, like, always been on the floor, really close to each other, but you're so entrenched in your garden, you don't really get to chat very much. So it'll be fun to hear, like, her perspective about this unique experience that we go through every year. All of the planning and everything you do is really it's in your own little bubble, and then all of a sudden you get thrown in and it's like, how does it compare to everybody else's garden? That part's always stressful to me. I love, like, thinking about planning, developing, building the gardens. The anticipation of the other stuff kinda makes me a little nutty. I love talking to all the people that come visit us at the show garden, answering questions and connecting with all the people and seeing how they, participate with the garden in real time. As a garden creator, you often don't get to see how people interpret your spaces in real time. The thing that I like so much about the garden show is that you get to be around, like, all of these other people that enjoy gardening and enjoy this world as much as I do. It's always the people. I love that part. This is a party for an extrovert. I love it when people have their little kids there and they're building gardeners. I love that. People thinking about what kind of garden they're going to build next year and they're dreaming, and you can kind of see that, like, little twinkle in their eye about what they're going to take home from what they're seeing at all the different gardens or they've seen in the displays. I can't wait to see what this year's show brings. I know what we're doing. I can't wait to see what everybody else is doing. I have, like, a little bit of an idea of what everybody else is doing, but, like, just enough to have envisioned what they're doing in my head, but not the ability to actually know. I hope this episode gave you a little peek behind the curtain. If you want to see what we're building this year, we'd love to have you there. We're giving away free tickets to the show. Check out the show notes to enter to win. That's it for today's episode of the Relish Gardens podcast. If you love this conversation, make sure to subscribe. We've got new episodes every week. And if you know a gardening friend who'd love this, send it their way. Sharing the show helps grow our little garden loving community. Until next time, I hope you find something in your garden to truly relish.